What up, guys? I'm former UFC fighter and current owner of Easton Training Center, Elliot Marshall.
I'm Scott Nickel, teaching pastor at Flatirons Community Church.
Scott, am I fucking going to hell?
Yes.
Welcome to the Saint
and the Sinner.
We're going.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody to episode 1 of Saint and the Sinner.
Which one are you, Scott?
I guess we'll figure that out.
All right.
We'll figure that out. I think some people have some ideas of which one both of us might be. But this is my name's Scott Nickel, and I'm a teaching pastor at Flatirons Community Church here in Boulder. And this is my good friend Elliot Marshall. Elliot, you want to say hi to everybody?
What's going on, everybody?
We're here. People probably consider us to be unlikely friends because I'm a Christian and a pastor, and Elliot he's defining his terms for me today. Go ahead, tell everybody what you are.
I'm an atheist. I'm as full an atheist as you can get. Now let me explain what I believe atheism is, and I'm going to kind of encompass what I think Scott is too, and why it is that we can get along. And I believe, and I'm gonna. This is stolen from one of the Four Horsemen, Richard Dawkins. So
one of my favorites.
One of your favorites, I'm sure, Scott. I'm sure you and him are buddy.
I liked Christopher Hitchens better. He's dead now, but I liked him better.
He is dead in hell.
He's funnier.
According to you. You know?
We'll get to that.
We'll get there. So Richard Dawkins uses a scale that I do agree with. He uses a scale from 1 to 7, saying that if you are a 1, you are an absolute atheist. Like, there is no doubt in your mind that there is no God and nothing. And a 7 is an absolute. Jesus is for sure the way, or God is for sure there. Gonna be 100%. I've never even questioned it. And he says that they're both impossible. And I think Scott and I agree with this. Right? So this is why we can be friends, because I'm a 2 and Scott's a 6. So some people would call me an agnostic or something like that. And agnosticism is just too soft for me. I'm an atheist.
So it's more than just I don't know, there could be. You're pretty sure there isn't a God.
I'm pretty sure that there isn't a God in any way that we've thought about him to this point.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, and I think the reason you would say that I'm like a 6 is because I would admit, as I think any believer of any faith system, or a Christian especially, should admit, I definitely have doubts. Everybody I think has those moments where you're like, oh man, I'm wrestling with doubt. So any Christian who tells you they never have doubts is a liar in my book. So I think a 6 is probably accurate.
Well, I doubt whether I love my wife on a daily basis. So
see, you've already gotten yourself in trouble. Know? We are 2 minutes into the podcast, and you're in hot water already.
I had to throw. She's not going to listen to this.
Yeah,
we've talked about this. My wife is not going to listen to this.
But she might want to listen to me. She'll fast forward through your parts?
Yeah, she'll just mute me out.
My wife said she would listen just because she wanted to hear you.
All right, sounds good.
So why don't we talk about our background just a little bit?
Sure.
Like, how did you get here? And here being defined as all of what you're doing right now. So what's your background?
So I grew up in New Jersey. So a little bit about my religious background as well. I grew up to a Jewish mother whose parents survived the concentration camps, who my mom just told me the other day, by the way, that she believes my grandfather was also an atheist when he died.
Huh.
Which,
the one who was in the concentration camps.
The one that was in the concentration camps. Yeah. And man, we did everything as far as Judaism, like Seder dinners, and he read out of the Bible, and man, we did it all. So that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
And my father was an African American Christian, raised Baptist, I believe. And I never went to church a day or synagogue a day in my life.
Was your dad raised like in the South or somewhere?
No. He was in New Jersey, but they were a Southern family.
Yeah.
They were a Southern family, and so that's how I was raised. And then I didn't really fit in New Jersey too well, and I left. I came out to Colorado, did martial arts my whole life. And by the way, that's a big part I missed. I did martial arts my whole life growing up in New Jersey. Came out here, met Amal Easton, wanted to continue my martial arts thing. Doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it just worked out for me. Got lucky. Worked hard, got lucky. And got to compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a decade. Got to fight for another, fight professionally for another 6-8 years, something like that. I ended up fighting in the UFC. Had 6 fights in the UFC. I was on the Ultimate Fighter show, and yeah, that was it. And then kind of funny story. I always knew I wanted to own my own martial arts school. Lost my last fight in the UFC on a Saturday night. I believe it was October the 27th, maybe the 29th. It was a Saturday, and came back on Tuesday and looked at the building that we purchased in Denver.
Nice.
To open the Easton Training, the first big Easton Training Center, which is a martial arts and fitness facility. And now we've got 2. My business partner, I'm married with a wonderful wife that I do love on a daily basis. Don't worry, she'll say the same thing about me, whether she loves him. She wonders whether she loves me too. This is how our relationship works. Nobody can figure it out. And we have 2 great kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 10-month-old.
Yeah. So I grew up kind of all over the place. My parents met at the University of Kentucky, which will be a big topic on this show, Wildcats.
Boo.
And they met there, and then my dad decided to go to law school in Michigan. So I was actually born in East Lansing, Michigan, strangely enough. They were on pretty rocky ground before I was even born. They got divorced, I think, shortly after I was born. So my mom and I moved down to Cincinnati and lived there until I was like 7 years old, something like that. My mom grew up in a military family, so moved around all over the place, but also very Southern Baptist. And so I think my mom, trying to kind of swing on pendulums but staying within the Christian faith, took us to Pentecostal church. So like the, speaking in tongues, dancing in the aisles, like falling on the floor type thing, getting smacked in the head, falling over, all that kind of thing. And then during that same time, my dad decided to go through what I refer to as his Catholic phase, which you don't normally meet a lot of people who like intentionally go out and embrace Catholicism. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like usually people grow up in it and then they're just in it or they leave it or whatever. But my dad, as like a 30-something-year-old guy, decided I'm going to try this Catholic Church thing. So like on
embracing Mormonism is a little weirder in my opinion, but
yes, I would agree.
That's my wife's family,
right?
My wife's mother. Whew.
Those are interesting stories too.
Yeah, for sure.
So for me, on any given weekend, because I would see my dad every other weekend, I may be at a Southern Baptist church with my mom and grandparents because we lived with them for a little while. I may be at the Pentecostal, dancing in the aisles church, which is the exact opposite of the Southern Baptist church. Like
sure.
Southern Baptist is very staunch and stoic and all that. Or I might be at the Catholic church. And as a kid, for me, all of it was boring. All of it. I mean, the dancing in the aisle thing was kind of entertaining, but it eventually got exhausting to watch. So I just grew up with like, church is boring. I don't really care, but I have to go. That was the way it was for me. So we lived in Texas for a little while, then moved to Kentucky when I was in like middle school age. And, again, mom just kind of made me go to church, and there were lots of hot girls at church, and so I didn't argue too much, By the end of, like, high school, I started...
Using church for the good things, huh?
Absolutely, man. You get to go on a bus with lots of hot girls overnight to retreats. Like, that's, when you're in middle school and high school, you're like, sign me up. I don't care what it costs or where we're going to end up or what songs I have to sing.
I've got to interrupt you because I've got a good story here.
Yeah.
So my mom swears that when I was in... And the first time I ever talk about this is in front of my wife, right? Because we were sitting there, and we were, I don't know if we were married yet or not. So my mom was swearing that she offered to take me and my best friend on a trip to England, right? When we were, 16, 17 years old, with her and 17 girls.
17
girls. And she swears that I said no. And I looked at her in the face, and I was like, Mom, are you on crack?
How would she procure 17 girls?
I don't know. Like, she was a high school teacher. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Now it makes sense.
Yeah. And she's like, yeah, you said no. I'm like, Mom, there is no way in hell that I said no to that. Like, like my odds are just too good.
Absolutely.
And I'm telling this story in front of my wife. And my wife looks over at me and she goes, huh, I asked you to go to England 6 months ago and you said no. And I was like, I just had nothing.
So England's the problem.
Yeah, I was like, shit. She's like, so you would go to possibly get laid when you were 16 or 17, but you wouldn't go with me. Why? And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm in so much trouble right now.
Nice.
So
well, yeah, so it's like, I mean, your odds are good, you know? So
yeah.
16, 17 years old, you know, sign me up for church.
Sure,
but
sure.
Later in high school, like, this whole Christianity faith thing started to become more real for me. Like, over the course of time, like, as you start to apply, like, your mind to it, I mean, eventually you start to actually think critically about what you're actually hearing and experiencing and stuff like that. So, long story short, I ended up going to, like, Bible college in Cincinnati, which... they had really low bar for like academics, so I knew I could get in because my high school career began with like a 1.6 GPA, and then I tried to dig myself out for the rest of it. I got kicked out of a Christian school in the meantime, by the way.
Good Christian.
So my 9th grade year, I got kicked out of a Christian school. That strangely enough, my wife and I had 3 or 4 classes together as freshmen, and we never spoke to one another. But I got kicked out of every class I had with her. Kicked out of algebra, science, and typing. Those 3 classes, and Allison was in all of them.
Nice.
So she just kind of watched that whole thing materialize.
She's like, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah, she's like, that guy's an idiot. And so, but I go to Bible college, and by this time, Allie and I had started dating at the end of our senior year of high school. And so, you know, I go through Bible college and really just focused on 2 things. One was learn as much as I can about the Bible and how to study the Bible, and get experience. So I interned at a church back in Kentucky pretty much for 3 years of that college time. And then when I got out, I joined the team there as a children's ministry pastor, and Allie and I got married and all that kind of cool stuff. So 8 years ago, moved out here to be the teaching pastor at Flatirons, and kind of the rest is history. So that's how we got here. Why don't we kind of talk about how we met?
Sure. I think it was kind of weird, right? So we have I fought in the UFC, and I sucked. So then I retired. Retirement means forced firing or whatever. You know, it's always forced retiring when it comes to fighting normally.
Yeah, somebody tells you
you're not good enough anymore. Yeah, for sure. So that, you know. But I you know, like I said, I opened the schools and I was coaching. So I had all these friends, Cody and Nate, and Cody Donovan and Nate Marquardt, Brendan Schaub, and all these guys that I was coaching still, you know, and some of the lower fighters that were still on the up and comings, you know, Vinny Lopez, and a bunch of these guys went to your church.
Right.
And I think the first time we met was when Dwayne was going away.
Yeah, I forgot about this. You mentioned this the other day. So Dwayne Ludwig. So if you're in the MMA world, you know who Dwayne Ludwig is. If not, he's world-renowned.
If not, you're not in the MMA world.
Right. World-renowned kickboxer, mixed martial artist.
And now coach. He's become the most famous for his coaching.
And I actually crashed that party. I wasn't invited.
Oh, really? That's even fun.
Yeah. So I was speaking for a conference downtown, and Vinny was over there.
Yeah.
And my son Eli, who's 8 now, wanted to go over and see all the cage fighters.
The fighters. So I'm good friends with Dwayne, and I got invited to that special party, not like him. You know, he's a crasher. So anyway, we went and we ended up like standing next to each other the whole night. But he had heard all these stories about me, and I had heard all these. And I knew he was a dumbass pastor, in my opinion. You know, so we basically just stood there and didn't talk. We barely said a word to each other.
I think we talked about kids a little bit.
A minute. Yeah, you know, I probably made some dumb joke about my wife, you know, and we laughed maybe, you know. So. That was our first meeting, right?
Yeah,
a couple more of these.
I knew because like Vinny, who's one of my best friends, and Cody, who I've gotten to know really well over the past couple of years. You've cornered both of them.
Yeah.
And at different times they've referenced, Elliot, man, he just like he busts my balls about my faith. You know what I mean? Like and they would come to me like, Elliot said this to me the other day. So what do I say back?
Yeah. So this is how this goes. So for my fighters, I will do absolutely anything before the fight. Doesn't matter. Like, I think Vinny's probably told you, I've prayed with Vinny, started it.
He's never told me that.
So yeah, man.
He didn't tell me the good stuff.
Yeah, he doesn't tell you the good stuff. See, he only tells you the bullshit. You know? Like, and I will bring it up when they're like really nervous and I can see that they need this talk.
Right.
Because it's not about me that day. Right? So anyway, when you go on trips a lot, fighting is a very emotional experience. It's a very scary experience. So you really start talking about some things about what you believe and you feel, and So a lot of times they start talking about God, and I'm really cool with it. I'm fine with it before the fight. It's just after the fight I don't want to hear it anymore. Like I've heard it for a whole.
You're like, all right,
I've heard it for 4 days. I'll do whatever you need before the fight. Win or fucking lose after the fight. I'm like, you know what, guys? And then they'll say something else. I'm like, you know what? That's some bullshit. And they're like, well, why didn't you say this before the fight? And I'm like, yeah, because it's not the appropriate time or place. But that's some bullshit. So stop.
You don't want to get in your fighter's head before the fight.
This is very true. We're not walking out, and I'm not saying, hey man, Jesus is a zombie.
There is no God. Now go in there and fight. Yeah. So I'm trying to think, like, the next time that I remember getting together with you. Like, I mean, we've run into each other fights over and over again. And then, really it all kind of came down to Cody Donovan had a fight out in Vegas last summer, right? Was it last summer?
When was it? It was before or after Boston. No, it was November.
Okay, so last fall.
Yeah, last fall.
So Cody asked me to go with him to his fight in Vegas, and obviously you were cornering him and all that kind of stuff. And I think even Cody was like, "What's going to happen?" Because these two guys are going to be like in close quarters.
So you have to understand, when you go to a fight, right? You go out. The fight is on a Saturday, and when you travel for the UFC makes you come out on Tuesday. So I think we came out on Wednesday or something, right? And as glamorous as professional fighting seems, and as cool as everyone thinks it is fucking boring.
Yeah.
Right? The week of that fight, you were doing nothing. Like, you walk to the workout room, work out a little bit. You walk, the fighter goes back and sleeps. Or maybe you eat very little bit because they're losing weight and you do nothing.
It sucks because he can't eat and you're hungry.
You're hungry
right?
all the
time. You're not doing anything.
Yeah. You don't work out. You end up just sitting in this hotel room a lot and
boring.
spending time. And sometimes, like Scott and I didn't know anything about each other, so we're spending a lot of time together. When we think, I'm like, man, that guy's probably an asshole, and he's like, Elliot's probably an asshole.
People told me you were.
Yeah. And I'm an asshole. I'm a complete asshole. I'm not even going to try to deny it. But
I don't think we broached we're sitting in this hotel room and it's just like a bunch of dudes sitting around and you're just like
with one dude's wife.
And this guy, the guy who's fighting, is going through this emotional roller coaster. So they ask like strange questions or throw out strange things, or they don't want to talk about anything, so you just sit there in silence or whatever. But at some point, you were like, "All right, fine. I think this is the way it went down." And you brought up Joel Osteen or something like that.
Yes, this is what made me like you.
You were like, so I don't remember it perfectly. All I remember is you were like, so help me understand. Like those guys on TV, like Joel Osteen, who smile and like tell everybody to send in all their money and blah blah, and God will make their life better. You said something like, "That's just not right." And I went, "No, I can't stand those guys." I think I said, like, if Joel Osteen were standing in this room, I would punch him in the teeth. Yes. I would get in line first ahead of all you guys to punch him in the teeth.
We talked about this the other day, that as much as I want to beat his ass, you do have first dibs.
More, I get dibs.
You get dibs because he's on your side of the fence
he
here.
claims to be on my team,
he's
so
on
that's
your
friendly
team.
fire.
Yeah, he's on your team, you know? So then I was like, then I got intrigued because I was like, oh shit, really? Like, he doesn't like Joel Osteen? Like, what fucking God-fearing, Jesus-loving Christian doesn't love a Joel Osteen, in my opinion?
And there's lots of us.
Yeah.
It's not just me.
And we have the same problems with Joel Osteen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's manipulative.
Yeah.
It's manipulative. Hey, if you give me more of this, then God will give you a better life, better health, better wealth, better prosperity, all that kind of stuff. Just send your check.
Or whatever it is. I'm pretty sure you're not really allowed to be that rich. They don't go hand in hand, right? I'm no pastor, and I have not read the whole entire thing. But I'm pretty sure you're supposed to give a lot of that back.
Well, yeah, there's like two sides to it. So one side would be like the prosperity gospel, which is what guys like Joel Osteen and lots of people you see on TV do this deal. Like there was some reality show called like Real Pastors of LA. I still haven't watched it because I get too angry. I'm positive of it. But yeah, there's one side that goes, hey, all of Christianity is for basically your betterment, your prosperity, your wealth. So demonstrate that, like flaunt it, show it off, and then people feel like they have somebody to look up to. So if you'll be more like me, then you'll get the Lamborghini and the big house in the hills or whatever. Then there's this other side of the pendulum that's called the poverty gospel, which basically says if you're a follower of Jesus, you're not allowed to have anything, sell everything, live like Mother Teresa, type thing. And I would say that both are wrong.
The 1 and the 7 argument.
Yeah, it's very similar, to go that both are wrong, because both are actually replacing following Jesus with gaining something else. One is saying following Jesus is the means to gaining wealth, and the other would say that following Jesus is the means to gaining some sort of superiority or piety demonstrated by poverty.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? So they're really kind of the same, which is interesting to me.
So anyway, Cody, weighs in.
Yep.
And then there's this oxygen bar in, where were we staying? The MGM, right?
MGM Grand, yeah.
Yeah, there's this oxygen bar in the MGM Grand that does IV bags, because, a lot of fighters, you dehydrate all this weight, so you want to rehydrate as quickly as possible. You get an IV bag. For all you doctors out there, I know that the best way to technically rehydrate is nice and slow with a fucking spoon of water, blah, 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 blah. Let me fucking tell you right now, you're wrong. You're fucking wrong. It might be better over the long term, but I'll tell you what makes me feel better. Instantaneously is the IV bag. I've had this argument a million times. I'm right, you're wrong.
Cody felt great.
Felt great. And you feel great instantly. Well, because technically, you're like when they go to Ethiopia and shit, and those fucking kids with the big extended stomach, they're so dehydrated. Yeah. You're supposed to give them a spoonful of water every minute for a very long time, because the gut
can't handle it.
No, because the gut absorbs liquid better than your veins do. Right? And I don't know what the difference is. I don't know if you need to be in severe dehydration, but I've tried the fucking gut thing, drinking, and it does not come close to the IV. The IV, you are instantaneously like, oh my god.
Yeah. He was on cloud
like
nine. Fucking
heroin. What I assume people like heroin do when they do heroin.
But we didn't want to sit and watch him for an hour.
So it's an hour-long thing. And you're in a casino, so what else are you going to do? You're either going to gamble or fucking drink.
Right.
So we drank.
Yeah, we went upstairs to Whiskey Down, right? But this was the first time we sat at Whiskey Down.
Yes.
Then before the fight, we started to talk about Christianity and faith a little bit.
But I think we were just talking.
Yeah.
And we could see that we actually liked each other and got along. But there was still this elephant in the closet.
Yeah, we mostly were talking about kids and family and fighting and all that kind of stuff.
And there was still this huge elephant in the closet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, he gets drunk.
Wait, it's elephant in the room. Is it a gay elephant? He's in the closet still?
I don't know. Is the gay, is the gay okay?
We'll talk about that too.
Is the gay okay?
So he fights.
He fights.
Yep.
And after the fight, what else is there to do but get fucking hammered? You're in Vegas.
I don't remember you being hammered. Either that or you hide it really well.
Oh, I'm the best hider.
You hid it well.
I am the best hider.
Because you still remember our conversation.
Oh yeah, my wife gets really mad because when I drink, I might smile a little more, but that's about the extent of it.
Yeah, I didn't know you were hammered.
I was so hammered, man. When I woke up in the morning,
we had the same flight out.
I was worried of whether I was going to be sober enough after the flight to drive home.
Well, that leads all kinds of other things, because I thought you were totally sober on the flight.
No, I was fucking wrecked.
All right, so we're at Whiskey Down, and everybody's there.
Drinking.
And, it was a tough night because Cody lost, and Cody was there, and so me and you were just standing there talking, and then Cody comes over, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Cody comes over and puts his arm around you and basically throws out something I'm sure he's said to you a million times or something. He's like, because you're very concerned about, you have standards. You have a way you want to live your life.
100%.
There are things you believe to be true.
100%.
There are things you believe to be right.
Yes.
And you want to adhere to those, follow those things, and all that. And I think what he was trying to throw out to you that night in his state,
sure,
was...
you could tell he was drunk.
What?
Okay.
Was that... if you're so concerned about there being truth and all that kind of thing, what do you base that on? He's like, who told you that was right? Who told you that was true? Where do you get that from? And then he basically is like, I'm out. And then
he just leaves just the two of us.
Yeah, he just leaves us to have this conversation. So we started diving into that question.
And I think we agreed.
What was it?
I think we agreed. So, and I was pretty drunk. So remember, maybe we're not going to be such good friends.
It's gonna be one episode.
Yeah, one episode podcast was that religion doesn't really. You can gain morality without religion, and religion doesn't necessarily give you your morals because there's a lot of people who follow religion and are very, very immoral.
Right.
Like you don't get your morality from the Bible or the Quran or anything else. You know, it's a different thing, and some people might use it to help them, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, and I think what we started to get into that night was, like following a faith system doesn't guarantee a moral person.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. All you have to do is look at, I don't know,
Joel
the
Olsen.
current news, history, all that kind of thing. But what we got into is kind of that idea of subjective versus objective truth. You know, so if you and I sit here and have an argument, and one of us says, the grass is green, and the other says it's blue, it actually is green.
Sure.
Because we can see it or observe it. But when we get into like these, moral arguments and things like that, eventually the question comes down to, well, who says? Who says? So like, we both sit here and go, yeah, you shouldn't murder that guy who's walking across the street right now. And we both go, of course not. But at some level, if you take that argument further, somebody has to go, well, who said that? Or who made that a universal, truth? Why is that something everybody should adhere to? And I would say God said, and you would say
society says.
Sure. And then I would go, well, society changes all the time.
100%. It used to be accepted.
Right.
So this is where we differ. And we'll
that's
get into
where we
all
start
this
to
stuff.
split. Yeah. So that's kind of the history, though, of how this went down. But like we had that conversation at Whiskey Down, and at some point you looked at me. We're talking about all this. You looked right at me. I do remember.
I just went.
And I think you
right
do this.
it. Yeah.
I've heard you've done this to other people or whatever. So you looked right at me and went, "Do you think I'm going to hell?" And for a Christian who, especially in I think our world now, we get told to be, to kind of soft serve a lot of things. That's not really how I'm wired, though. So I did have this moment of like.
And I asked this question to a lot of Christians, right?
Yeah.
Because this is when you start to, in my opinion, really delve from the bullshit Christians to the actual Christians. Because the actual Christian will give me the truth, will give me their truth, and the bullshit Christian will try to be nice to me.
Right. So I looked right at you and went, yes.
Without skipping a beat.
Right. Yes. But you don't have to, and I don't want you to. And then we kind of went from there. But I was really intrigued because you didn't seem to get angry.
No,
in fact, it seemed the other way around.
Look, so there's two. I asked questions for a reason, and one I wanted to. If you were for real, you would say yes, right? Because you have to.
Right.
Because if you don't say yes, then in my opinion, you're not a fucking Christian.
Right.
Right. Because if I can get into heaven, if you're a Christian, there's only one way to heaven. You can fucking rape the shit out of 1 million women. And if you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior after or before, whenever, I don't know, you go to heaven, and I don't, right? And that's how you believe.
Right.
And if you say that's not how you believe, then you're not a fucking Christian.
Right. So at some level, there was like this, oh, okay,
I
so we can
respected it.
continue, hanging out after that. And I like the directness of your question. Like, let's just cut to brass tacks,
I'm fine with going to hell.
So
why the podcast?
Yeah, why the podcast? And it was your idea, so
so we hung out a couple times, right? Yeah. And this is the podcast because Scott does jiu-jitsu.
I'm an accomplished jiu-jitsu.
He's an accomplished jiu-jitsu practitioner.
0 for 3 in my first tournament.
0 for 3. I do jiu-jitsu, obviously. We both do CrossFit.
Slightly more accomplished than me.
I've won maybe a tournament here or there.
I am a 2-stripe white belt, although rumor is I have a promotion coming my direction.
We have a promotion coming. A 3rd stripe or a blue belt?
Well, no, probably stripes. I don't think we're talking belt. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
We'll see.
Well, congratulations with that shit, Humps.
Thanks. We both do CrossFit.
We both do CrossFit. We're married. We have kids. We have a lot in common, except I'm going to hell. Like that's our not in common. And I joke. We were at lunch and we worked out after a workout, or I don't know when it was. I was like, man, it'd be cool. We should do a podcast, kind of as a joke, but kind of serious, like just to threw it out there. And then Scott did a sermon, and he had me in the sermon. Not me personally. He was just talking about
I was telling the story of us and Whiskey Down. And
Whiskey
all that
Down,
kind of
you know? And which you were a little wrong about my problems with it, but we'll get into that too.
All right. That's the beauty of being able to talk without anybody else interacting. I can say whatever I want.
Say whatever you want. Yeah, for sure. So, and he mentioned that we might do a podcast. And then afterwards, I was on vacation in Hawaii. By the way, where I saw a Flatiron sticker on the back. I texted it to him on the back of a street sign. I was in Hawaii, and there's this sticker.
It's a sign
from God,
Elliot.
I was like, fuck, man, I can't get away from this shit.
It's a sign from God.
A sign from God. To do the podcast. So Scott mentioned it, that we might do the podcast, and he said he got like a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Just like, that sounds great, and not just
I had atheists.
Fucking Christians.
Yeah, I had atheists coming up to me in the lobby at church. You're like, I love that story, and I would totally listen to that podcast. And so, like, for me, like, it became more real throughout the weekend. Like, I was, at first, like, Saturday night I referenced it. People thought, like, I threw out the name as being, like, the atheist and the pastor or something like that, and people laughed. But I could tell that people are like, we would listen to that. And then, so throughout the weekend, it was more like, I think we might actually do this, you know? And so we've been talking about it ever since, and kind of the way we want it to work is we don't want to just talk about faith and atheism and all that kind of stuff. We're not going to argue the whole time.
We're not going to argue every episode. We're not going to,
Yeah, I'm sure we'll argue some like our normal lunch conversations go, but there's a lot of things that you and I agree on, and one of the things, it's kind of one of my pet peeves about our culture right now is that like people can't disagree with one another honestly and still be friends.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's polarized, and politics is the easiest place to point to where like, everything's polarized. Nobody wants to work together. Nobody wants to be friends. Everybody's got to demonize one another, and I guess that'd be the essence of it. Like, we disagree on something that I think's important, but I don't want to demonize you. He's just the sinner. And that goes back to the name of the podcast of like, people have perceptions of atheists that I don't think are all true. And then also people have perceptions of pastors, saint. I'm not a saint. When I'm at a party and somebody looks at me after 30 minutes of conversation, and then they finally go, "So what do you do?" I have to like take a deep breath because I know what's coming next. I go, "I'm a pastor," and then like the record screeches to a halt, the whole room ceases to talk, and everybody looks at me like I'm a leper, you know what I mean? And
oh man, I said I cheated on my wife in front of that guy.
And that's what people do is like they start going back like, what have I said in the past 30 minutes? And I've had people apologize to me for swearing and people, all that kind of stuff. And it's like this big barrier for me with people where they have this perception that I probably think I'm better than I am, or they think I'm better than I really am.
Sure.
And so that's part of the essence of this podcast is to kind of break through some of those barriers and stuff like that. But we want to talk about all kinds of things, right? So we'll probably talk about, UFC cards.
Talk about UFC. We'll talk about family, jiu-jitsu, CrossFit, politics, faith, obviously.
Science, all that kind of
stuff. Whatever you want to talk about. And then we hope that you as the listeners tell us what you want to talk about,
Yeah.
I want to know what you think about my sinning ass and his sinning asses, We both blow it sometimes,
So we'll probably figure out a way to let our listeners, email in or throw stuff on Twitter or whatever. And we'll do these first couple episodes, kind of set the topics, but after that, we kind of want to let the listener do that. So that's how it all works.
I have to say, as far as doing the podcast thing, I was talking to them all about it, because this is a touchy subject for me, right? Because I own 2 businesses with somebody else. It's not just me that's going to burn, if people don't like me.
Yeah.
So I was talking to him about it. I was like, man, do you think this is going to be okay? Are we going to lose half of our student base?
Yeah.
And he was like, nah, first of all, our first school's in Boulder. We'll be good.
It might help.
And he's like, secondly, he's like, man, I'm actually really excited for it. He's the one who came up with the Saint and the Sinner. He's the one who told it to me. And then he's like, I'm actually excited. He's like, because I try to get you to read some books about fucking business and marketing and all that shit. And all you do is read that other nonsense, in my opinion. And now at least you'll have an outlet for it. So I was like, hell yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and it's funny because I had a conversation at Flatirons too, because I was like, here's the deal. Like, this is something Elliot and I are doing on the side. This isn't like me officially representing Flatirons, but there's no way for me to not do that either. Sure. So wherever I go, that goes too. And so I was like, hey, here's the thing. Like, we'll have some Christians get on this thing, and Elliot's going to drop an F word within 30 seconds. And I think he made it longer You probably.
Yeah,
You'll play back the tape.
but I insulted my wife very
Oh
quickly.
yeah, see,
you know?
so that trumps that.
Yeah,
And I was like, and it's gonna offend some people, you know what I'm saying? And I'm okay with that. But so it was one of those things where it was like, I just need to get that on the table, you know, for my leadership at Flatirons too, just to go, hey, this is how this is gonna roll.
This is your thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited about it. I think it's gonna be fun. So I think if we can kind of demonstrate to people, here's what it looks like for two guys who agree on a lot of things, disagree on some things, to hang out, talk about those things, and then we'll go train afterwards and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, we're doing it here at the school because we'll wake up early on Monday mornings and then we'll go hang out afterwards after he tells me whatever he has to tell me and I tell him whatever I have to tell him, you know?
Yeah, so there's Saint in the Sinner, episode 1. Hope some people listen.
Take care, guys.
Peace.